Robin, let me jump to you for a moment. When we talk about the problem of patient diversity in clinical trials, I almost feel like we need to look at it in terms of the larger healthcare system. Certainly, we know folks in this country do not have access to the same level of healthcare. I think we saw with COVID infection rates a disparity between one community and another one. If we want to get greater minority participation in our clinical trials, do we need to find better ways to engage those patients at the different phases of their life cycle, perhaps?
Ed, I'm really glad you asked that question. Thank you. I think that the importance of that bigger picture context can't be overstated. We have people who do not have access to the same healthcare system that I have, for example. People whose experience has been not being treated respectfully, not having concerns addressed, being talked to disrespectfully. We have people who've simply not had access to care. Insurance rates are differing between different communities, which doctors are willing to take which kinds of insurance. And we've seen for many years, for decades now, poor healthcare quality and poor healthcare results for African American and Latino populations in particular. And so I think it would be an error to simply assume that the world of clinical trials is a bit different than that somehow. It is part of people's healthcare, and we need to be thinking about it that way. And that includes focusing on the totality of the healthcare that one experiences from any of these groups.
I think trust is certainly an issue. I feel there are folks in this country who still have an inherent distrust of the pharmaceutical industry and perhaps the FDA as well. I've even heard people say that if you're a minority in this country, that your symptoms may not be taken as seriously as the same symptoms appearing in another person. So that trust issue, I think, has to be addressed at some point. Can you think of anything that the pharma industry can do to maybe better build trust within those communities?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that this is an issue that's faced the pharma community for a long time, and not only with racial and minority groups in the U.S. I think people have cause to be concerned about and lack trust in clinical trials because they're potentially signing up for an experimental drug that could go in their body, or for an experimental drug that they badly want to not go in their body, right? And so first of all, there's a trust in the actual process, right? What does it mean to subject myself to being part of an experiment? But beyond that, I think when you think about the history of how minority communities have been treated in the US, both in terms of their healthcare, as I just mentioned, but even within clinical trials. So we had a clinical trial running in this country called the Tuskegee experiment that was run by the US government. And overlooking that would be quite a miss for all of us to not discuss and address that. I believe it ran until the early to mid 1970s. I don't have specific dates in my head. And this was a group of men whom syphilis was allowed to take its course untreated for decades after a treatment existed. And so And the 1970s are not that long ago for a community and a community's memory. So I do think that one of the things that may be helpful are some very honest conversations. The ability to say to a community, we know about this past, we know about what's come. We don't know what that means to you. We don't know what it would be helpful for you to hear from us and for us to offer you. And making it a genuine two-way dialogue, just like Richarde was just mentioning, it can't be pharma companies talking at a group of people, right? Any more than it could be the government talking at a group of people or me talking at a group of people. To build trust, it's very much a two-way conversation is very important.